anthropology, and my basic interest is in the study of diplomacy and in Russia. But I have a sideline in theory and methods, and I'm going to present a paper today on some work I did with my wife, who is a sociologist and criminologist. And the topic that you wanted me to talk about are living with situatedness. So, the precondition we're talking about here is that is a philosophy of science, that we are thinking about the world as being at one with our minds. I mean, if you think that there is an Archimedean point outside of the social world from which you can see what's going on, so that you are detached from what you can see, then you don't have to worry all that much about where your own situatedness is. You can chop the world into, you can use the language of variables, for example, dependent and independent variables. And you can sit back, you can quantify the thing, and you can come up with the results. And that's fine. I mean, that's one way of doing science. This is not the way of doing science that I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about kinds of social science where the precondition is that we are producing our own data. And this is old hat. I mean, since Dilthey, since Hume, really. But particularly since Dilthey. You know, the idea that the human sciences, the humanities and social sciences, or however you want to phrase this, make up a separate realm, and that is a separate realm among other things because self-reflectiveness comes into it, and because our mind is part of the world that we are studying, makes it different. And there are a number of approaches to how we should look at this, how to do it. Anthropology is a rich literature. I would tip my hat to that and draw on that in a minute. Hermeneutics is a tradition which specializes in this. It tries to understand the circle of learning between a certain person and the environment, while seeing the person as part of that environment. But in hermeneutics, one is quite often thinking about the self simply as something that is in this circle and doesn't come to the interaction and the study with any particular advantage. So, what we're doing in this paper is that we are looking at how to situate ourselves as researchers in 3 different phases of the research process. These would be the pre-field phase, questions about why do we study what we study? Why do we tend to use the particular tools that we use in order to study it? What kind of stuff do we bring with us into this phase? Why is it, for example, that so few males study feminism? I think we know why. Why do so many Russians study Russian foreign policy? I think we know that one as well. Why do so many liberals study the UN? And the list goes on and on and on and on. If you have a look at people studying an erection, it will be, not always, but there may be specific reasons why people would choose to study an erection. And those reasons are relevant for what they are seeing when they're studying. The baggage that they bring to the job impinges on how the job is being done. That's the pre-field phase. Then there is a field phase I'm going to dwell on. That's where my presentation will be the most method, as it were. By method, I simply mean production of data. The method is a means to produce data. Questions to do with how we hook up to the world are not questions of method. They are questions of methodology, which is very different. And in the field, we have a rich literature about fieldwork, we have a rich literature about interviews. I mean, each social science tends to fetishize one of these techniques. With anthropologists, it's observation. With sociologists, it's interviews. And this goes on. And then the third thing I want to talk to you about is situatedness when it comes to writing the texts, the third phase of the research. I mean, research isn't done before the results are being written up. Right? That is regardless of whether you need to write a thesis or not. You have to write up the damn thing. Right? And then the question is, how do you situate yourself in relation to that? It's not always. I also note at the outset that although these are three different sort of phases of a temporal sequence, there is also a recursivity between these three phases. I don't know about you, but I've been doing research now for 35 years, and I have yet to have a project where I started by choosing a thing, then I did the thing, and I wrote it up. That's not the way it works. You start with a general idea of what you're looking at, you start looking at it, and you change what you're after. You start writing, and you decide that you have to change the problematique because the writing doesn't really fit up. And so there is a recursive element to the research project. And there is a reason why we always write the introduction last. I open a parenthesis here in order to make a remark about what we do more and more, applying for money to do research. Applications imply that we already know what we're going to find. So there is a sense in which if you can write an application to get money for research, you don't need to do the research because you already know what you're going to find. So there is a paradox in also application making. So what I'm telling myself when I'm writing applications is this is an instrumental exercise. I'm applying to get money. Now what I'm going to do when I get the money is something entirely different. And I've gotten away with it so far. I close that parenthesis. So, in illuminating this, the missus and I found out that it would be good to draw on three different literatures that have specialized in situatedness over the years. So in order to discuss the pre-field phase, which we called autobiography, we draw on feminist work, particularly on the work of people like Doris Smith. When it comes to the field phase, we draw on the Gestalt tradition. Does anyone have a clue what the Gestalt tradition is? I thought I'll be coming back to it. I mean, it's one of these cases. John Gray, who was a professor of political theory in this place, he specialized in writing books about how humanity comes up with stuff and then forgets the insights. And you know, the Gestalt tradition is an example of this. I'll come back to that. And the third phase, the people who've been looking most at self-situatedness and text and how the self is tied up with the text would be post-structuralists. So I'm going to draw on those when I present that part of the research. So let me start in earnest by looking at autobiography, autobiographical situatedness. Quote Hannah Arendt, although everybody started his life by inserting himself into the human world through action and speech, nobody is the author or producer of his own life story. In other words, the stories, results of action and speech, reveal an agent, but this agent is not an author or producer. Somebody began it, and is its subject in the twofold sense of the word, namely its actor and sufferer, but nobody is its author. So here, Hannah Arendt draws on her old friend and teacher, Heidegger. So, what feminists have been doing, basically, in this regard, is to think structurally. The argument goes something like this, and this is Sandra Harding's version of an argument that is quite often used by feminists. Social phenomena are products of structures. Structures cannot be seen, but they can be observed. They can be induced through their effects. Now, humans are products of structures because they are social material. So humans, subjects, may count as something that is shaped by social structures. This means that one way of finding out about a structure is to observe humans. I am a human, which means that if I look at how I was formed, how I was shaped in my subjectivity, then I can use that in order to trace back to what the structure that engendered me as a brat was. That's the thing. So the most typical method coming out of this is so-called memory work. Feminists sit down and look at how the social structure shaped them into the specific gender subjects that they are. And the interest for us in this is that you will find, in this way, you will find the specific traits, specific stuff from the past that shaped you and gave you certain interests. It does not necessarily have to be gender that is of the essence here. You could do the same kind of thing with a number of other stuff. So you can say, for example, let me use an example. Let me use the example of studying the Roma, gypsies. Why would you study the Roma? Aaron, you're doing work on Russia and Eastern Europe. Roma all over the place. Some people study them, some don't. Now why? If the church of phenomenon is how Roma were exterminated in Nazi concentration camps, for example, it is directly relevant to ask oneself why this choice has been made. Why do I want to study that? Is it because of some ethnic or social attachment to Roma? If so, the utmost autobiographical question is distance to group attachment, and the memories to concentrate are those that pertain to these aspects of one's own identity. So that would be one possibility. That one is of Germans, one is of Roman stock, or one has some kind of close affinity to this group. Sorry. But there are other possibilities. It could be, for example, because one feels that one wants to study the Roman experience with the Holocaust, because other stories, such as the story of Israel's story about the Jewish Holocaust, have repressed the story about the Roman Holocaust. If this is the case, then the utmost autobiographical question becomes questions of subordinates and fairness. And the key autobiographical question is what it is about one's own socialization. Is it a Scandinavian inclusive national culture? Is it a Christian universalistic upbringing that has inculcated such a universalistic and fairness-minded way of looking at the world? So that's a second possibility. And the third possibility may be that the choice of Roma as an object of study is due to childhood fascination with travelers. I know one person studying the Roma, she's an anthropologist, and the reason why she does it is that as a child she thought that the idea of moving from place to place was just absolutely fantastic. And when she had the chance of starting her anthropological career, she did first a master's degree and then a doctoral degree because she wanted to try this life from moving from place to place. So a romantic project. Here we are at three very different ways into the field of research. And these ways will shape the research process. A reader alerted to autobiographical situatedness would ask at this point exactly why Cecily, my wife, and I are choosing Roma as an example. Well, that is because Cecily has a Roman great-grandfather, and sometimes asked in shocks to leave because it happened earlier this summer. First she was asked whether she was from Hungary, and then she was told to leave. This was in Cyprus. So I'm wondering what the heck is going on? And it turned out that 3 kilometers from the shop, the sunglasses shop that we were visiting, there was a Roma village. Right? So it is no coincidence that we use the Roma as an example. It's also an example of how ethnography can illuminate how you react to this kind of stuff. So, this is fair enough. Another example, I mean this is the object of study. Another example that we use in the paper is my own upbringing and the fact that I happen to be a Foucauldian. Now, at first blush, there is nothing in my background that would suggest that I should become a Foucauldian. upper middle class white bloke from Scandinavia. I mean, there is nothing subaltern about my life that would sort of suggest that I should end up being a student of Foucault. And yet, when I read Foucault, I immediately knew that I had found my guy. I mean, I just knew. And why was that? Well, Foucault's specialty is to demonstrate how power comes from everywhere, how it's inscribed on the body, and how you yourself tend to collaborate in your own suppression. And as it happened, I had a nurse when I was 3 years old who used me as a sexual plaything. And the way she did what she did to let me make me collaborate in this was to let her suck my tits. So I was part of my own repression. And you know, I never wondered why I'm Foucauldian, because I knew immediately when I read this stuff that, this is how power works. And why was that? Because I had a bodily experience with this kind of thing. Now, why is this important for research? It is important for research because if you start, for example, generalizing this kind of human experience, you're up the creek. A lot of people do not have this kind of experience. And you can start sort of seeing into situations where power may work in much more subtle ways. You can start assuming this kind of direct stuff. So this kind of socialization, which has nothing to do with, or nothing to do with, which is not directly the result of the standard suspects of class, gender, and ethnicity, will explain this. You could have other examples, and people studying stuff because, for example, they would have something that would have a dysfunction, for example. Same kind of thing. So we assert that having a look at where you're coming from and having an insight in what sort of stuff you are looking for and how you're looking for it may better the research because you become more alert to what's actually going on when you're doing research. So that's the auto-ethnographic phase, as it were, situating yourself pre-field. Then there is the question of field situations. And that is all about that is all about how you come across in the field. Let me take an example. I have a colleague who's a Russianist, and he has long hair. He's had that long hair since the 70s. It's a 1968 long hair. It's long hair that is a political statement. It's not long hair as a sexual way of getting laid. It's a political long hair. And in Russia, when you do research, in the Soviet Union particularly, having long hair is not particularly easy because you are considered to be, well, the political statement that is made is not appreciated. There are very few people where you can sort of fit in with this kind of thing. His solution to this was to use a short hair wig. So he would walk around with his hair in a short hair wig. Pretty smart stuff. And why would he do that? Because the sort of answers and the sort of people he would talk to him and the sort of answers he would get to questions and the sort of situations he would get to observe would be a function, among other things, of how he came across as a persona. This is fairly simple in international relations. If you are all of 5'3", you're a woman, you weigh about 3 pounds, and you come from an Indian background, let's say. And you interview a colonel in the American army. Will you get the same answers if you are about 100 stone, a male, and dressed in a t-shirt? Then the answer is an obvious no. I mean, I've been around military people enough and I've done my conscription, so I know that this makes a difference. The entire sort of approach of the military people interviewed will change when they are speaking to someone that they share. It's not just a gender thing, it's also a thing about expectations, about knowing specifically about military. And I've seen this happen. I have a colleague, an American woman whose name shall not be mentioned, who has a high-pitched voice. And you know, this is one of the things that she works with in the field situation. How do you interview military ranked offices when you have a high-pitched voice. I mean, you have to think about how you can do that, that you don't come across as not fitting in. And this goes for all possible kinds of settings, right? That your persona would be one of the things that determines what kind of information you get out. And one way of thinking about this is with the Gestalt psychologists. Now, Gestalt, as you can hear from German, is a German word. Goethe used it. It's a commonly, it's an everyday word. It was an everyday word in German in the late 1800s. And it means something like the rote Blut. Now, what we call the Gestalt tradition refers to a number of experimental psychologists working at the end of the 1800s, people like von Erich. These people, psychology was not a separate domain at this stage. They worked at the interstices of physiology, which was a discipline, and psychology. And what they were in, they were all inspired by Husserl. So phenomenology is the philosophical fount of the Gestalt tradition. And what they were interested in was active cognition. How our senses pick out stuff. What is it to view something and see something? And the key thing was that one of the ways that we see things, one of the ways that we produce what we see, I mean, cognition is an active thing, it's not a passive thing, it's active. One of the ways we do this is that we see in wholes, hence the word Gestalt, wholes. It's not only that we see what we expect to see out of earlier experiences, which is relevant here. That is one thing that we come across. And social psychologist, his name now escapes me, he'll come back, who did experimental work in the 50s on how social experience and social background experiences condition vision. The name will come back to you. How many have watched the last but one episode of Breaking Bad? Not everybody. Well, give you the example afterwards. I'll use another example. Stanley Milgram. Stanley Milgram is the guy I'm thinking about. Stanley Milgram did things like he went into the US equivalent of a tube station, and he would stage two 16-year-old boys to stand stock still at the platform. And then he would have a 60-year-old boy attacking him. Then he would interview people at the other side of the tracks, ask them what they had seen. Now, what do you think the answer is?
I was trying to picture it. So it was two 16-year-old boys and then a 60-year-old man.
Here on the tracks,
okay.
So there is no interaction between the platform. Yeah. Your side of the platform is staged. So Milgram puts two 16-year-old boys there, and they stand stock still. And then he has a 60-year-old man attacking them and mugging them. At this side of the platform, life goes on. So people watch this. Up close.
So could it be...
What did they see?
Could it be that they maybe thought that the two boys had misbehaved and were being told off by the older man?
Not only that, they all saw two 16-year-old boys attacking a 60-year-old man. And you can do this the next time you meet a child. Take a cup, place it in front of the child with the handle away from the child. Ask them to draw a cup. And I bet you 10 to 1, well, I bet you 50 to 1, that they will draw a cup with a handle. So you don't draw what you see. You draw what you expect to see, because a cup, by definition, has a handle. Now, where does the Gestalt tradition come into this? They were the ones that were able to show experimentally that we actually see in wholes. And one of the first experiments was they didn't have what do you call it? Neon signs in those days. and it wasn't the neon sign they used, but the equivalent is a neon sign. You know these neon signs where things will light up and then will sort of spread out as a wave, right? I mean, we experience that as a wave. And of course it is no such thing. It is simply lights, bulbs coming on in rapid succession, right? I mean, animated film, same kind of way. But the whole point here is that we see that as movement. There is no movement involved, but we see it as movement. Why is that? Because that is the gestalt. You know, we don't see each boom, 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 boom point. We take in the whole thing. That was an early breakthrough for gestalts. Now, the transposition of that from pure laboratory research and more sort of in situ research was a man called Wolfgang Köhler, who was one of the first persons in the world doing research on primates. And what he was interested in was, how do primates solve problems? So he would do things like putting up boxes with a box in the middle and, you know, a stick next to it. So if the sort of ape that was tested was able to stand on the box and use the stick, he could get the banana dangling from it. And the best one of this one was, you know, he would close them in a cage with a glass wall. And then there was a little hatch. And, you know, if you understood that you could sort of get the hatch away, you could be around the glass wall and you can get the food at the other side of the glass. And this research involved having these apes do these things. And, you know, the apes invariably went ape, as it were. They became frustrated and started smashing things. It's not gender, this kind of problem solving, you know. I can think of times when I've sort of become physically violent to inventory because I couldn't solve the problem. So, you know, this is sort of one reaction that we can also find in ourselves, right? So, you know, they would smash the stuff that they would need to solve the deal, right? But the key point about the research was that once the ape understood how to do it, it was not this thing and this thing and this thing and this thing. It was what in good English is called an epiphany. In a blink of insight, they understood this is the way to do it, and boom, around the glass wall, into the food. So then Köhler used his 2-year-old daughter in the same experiment. And the same thing happened, you know. She was standing there, and then suddenly she understood how to do it, and in one fell swoop, boom, around. So, you know, both the insight and the reaction to it was one package of movement, or one package of insight. And then he did the same thing to his dog, which was absolutely terrible, because the dog was just standing there and just, you know, sort of totally paralyzed by its sense of smell. You know, it just didn't move. You know? So anyhow, the point here is a general point that our sensory setup, as it were, our weapon, is geared towards taking in wholes. Now this is very important, because the Gestalt psychologists then went on to apply this to stuff that is directly relevant to what we're talking about here. Let me give you an example of how a Gestalt psychologist by the name of Gordon Wheeler is writing about this. He's trying to explain how Gestalts can look at what they call figure and ground. I mean, you foreground something, it means you put something else in there. Right? The most famous Gestalt drawing ever may be that woman, where you either see an old woman with a crooked nose, or you see a woman that looks like an Art Nouveau lamp from the 1930s spreading out. You don't know this drawing? So the whole point there is that either you see it or you don't see it. And you see the Gestalt. You don't see anything in between. Suddenly you see it, and then you see it either as one or the other. So the field, what you see in the one is background in the other, and vice versa. The general thing is, when you're in the field, how do things spring out on you? How do things become figure and not ground? And I thought I would take an example from the literal field in order to demonstrate what they mean by this. Here is Gordon Wheeler. For example, take the figure of a haystack, within or against the gestalt or map of the war landscape. According to the subject's goal of the movement, survival, conquest, escape, reconnaissance, forage, rest, and so forth, the same haystack may be perceived as a threat or shelter, protection or obstacle. And more than this, its value and even identity will be perceived differently according to where and how it lies in relation to other perceived objects on the map. Lines of sight, battle lines, distance, and so on. Thus perceived and located, the haystack becomes part of the changed and organized background or ground, or map, in relation to which new figures may then arise. You see why this is directly relevant for anyone being in the field, observing, doing interviews, whatever. Because what you see, suddenly see it. And you can see it, some people will see some things, and other people will see other things. And this is again a question of class, gender, ethnicity, etc. So, I'm not going to go into, I'll be happy to share the paper, by the way. So just tell me if you want it. Just give yet another example of an insight that the Gestalt tradition can offer us, which can help us in doing research, which is that they come up with a lot of what they call contact mechanisms, meaning that there are modes of perceiving. One of them would be confluence, meaning that people will try to create a good atmosphere. They will sort of float together with their informants. And we've all met people like that who are sort of very easy to talk to because they are almost not there. They are sort of making social scenes, as it were. We watched the Woody Allen film Zelig. He's the ultimate in this kind of thing. He becomes physically the person he's talking to. That's confluence for me. Two rivers running together, confluence. So, why is this relevant? Well, because my wife is confident. So when she does an interview, she goes in and she tries to make this ambience. But the problem is, that's a very good way of getting somebody to talk. But it's also hampering, because how do you ask the hard questions? Questions that you expect to destroy the good atmosphere. Well, you don't. The way she does this is that when she goes in to do an interview, she will have a list of the hard questions she knows will come up. And she's mentally ticking them off, because she knows that if she doesn't bring that list, she will not bring herself to asking the questions. Now, my problem is more projection. I have a hard, it's a challenge not to think that people say this, that, and the other thing. I will read too much into it, and because it reminds me of somebody else, I won't listen to what is being said. Which makes for very bad social science, because you want to just find the same things over and over and over again, although they're actually different. This has to do with my own. So what do you do when you see that kind of, when you have that kind of problem? Well, what you do is, someone says something and you feel that you're about to say, oh no, not that again. You say, hang on, this is a new social situation, it may mean something else. And you ask those extra 2 or 3 questions to ascertain whether that is the case, instead of just cutting off and being impatient. This is directly relevant for interview techniques. Let me jump to the third phase for situatedness, which is text. James Joyce once said that the writer should be in his creation as God in his, mainly hidden. You should not leave traces of yourself as a social scientist in the book. It's the lesson for us. Now, anthropologists, post-structural anthropologists, have been looking into this for years now. The best examples from the book where this is being done is a book by Paul Rabinow called Fieldwork, Notes on Fieldwork in Morocco. Do we have any anthropologists in the room? Right. The Notes on Fieldwork on Morocco is all about how Paul Rabinow feels about being in Morocco and talking to the Moroccans, all his anxieties and angsts about messing up and what he can do wrong, and how he steps into the wrong kind of field. And at the end of the book, we know a lot about Paul Rabinow. We don't know so much about Moroccans. The Moroccans somehow aren't there. And That is a critique, of course. But the exercise as such is very important. What is the writing process doing? Where do you place yourself in the writing process? Some of us will flag in the preface to what we write, be that an article or a book, where we were situated in the research. And if we don't, it may easily come across as cheating. I'll give you an example. Pierre Bourdieu's doctoral thesis. I don't know whether you've read it. It's called Le Bal de Célibataire, Bachelor Ball. And it's about unmarried males in Bial, where he came from. That he goes to a dance, and these males in slightly sort of old-fashioned suits don't get to dance. They are wallpaper or wallflowers, right? And then he uses this to make a whole analysis of why things go to hell in a handbucket in Bial and other sort of rural settings. Now, one thing he doesn't mention is who his main informant was for this project. His mother. He used his mother to get the background story on the families and when they were married and when they went married and when the daughters left and when the sons decided to stay, etc. So without the mother, no research. This is not good anthropology. You're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to use your mother as your major informant. And nowhere in the book does he mention that he did this. I forgive him because the book is a good book, but it would have been even better if he had situated himself and come clean on this. We would have known where he got his data from. It makes a difference to how we read the book and to the validity of the data. I know it. It's not that he disqualifies himself, but it would have been an even better book if he had come. And these things make a difference. So, you know, how do you sort of put yourself into that text? If you put yourself too much in, nobody's interested, because we're not really interested in the social scientist. We're interested in what kind of insight the social scientist can bring to society. But as I started by saying, we must not forget the feminist insight that if humans are products of social relations, then looking into yourself can tell you something important about the social relation that's for you. So, in conclusion, it's important to situate yourself. There are two ways of doing it in terms of philosophy of science, in terms of methodology. One way is what you can call reflexive way. But most feminists are thinking, okay, let me look at how the social situation changes me. But the other way is an analytical way. Say, let me think about how I change the social setting that I am studying. So, you know, if we think with George Herbert Mead, you can think of the self either in I, which is how I feel, or me, which is what I see. Then you could think of sort of doing this method in two directions as a way. You situate yourself by thinking, how am I perceived by the others, or how do I perceive the others, and what do the others do to me? And reflexivists hold the field when it comes to situatedness. But I would argue that there are other traditions. The Weberian tradition, for example, drawing up ideal types actually starts with situating yourself, asking which are the values I bring to building this ideal type. Weber is very clear about it. Ideal types are based on value. They're based on situatedness. And observing what's going on in this sense is because you make a value commitment, you can find out whether that value commitment is relevant to a certain situation, for example. Or a Foucauldian perspective. Foucault is very much situated in what he's doing. I mean, he had severe psychic challenges as a very young man, and he went on to study the assignment. He was sadomasochistic homosexual, and he went on to study the history of homosexuality. He is definitely situated in what he's doing, but nowhere does he talk about what's happening to him as he does to himself, as he does to himself. Nowhere. I've read my Foucault. I haven't found one place in which he uses what is happening inside himself. He does reflexivist stuff on this. It's all about the analytical purchase that his background can bring to us. So, you know, his situatedness lies just below the surface. It's never allowed to come out and sort of become a figure, as it were, to speak in Gestalt. So those are two different ways of doing it. And the wife and I have been discussing this back and forth because she's more of a reflexivist and I'm more of an analyticist. But we decided that we couldn't end, it would have been elegant to end the article by saying, okay, here are two ways of doing it, and here we have two representatives, two sports stores. But we decided that we wouldn't really sort of want to come so heavily down on one way of doing situatedness because we both seen it in both ways. So in order for research to be relational, there is a case for trying to combine these two approaches and to try to get a relation both from the working social scientists' perspective and from what you think is the perspective of the informant. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much.
The Association for the Study of Ethnicity and Nationalism is an interdisciplinary student-led research association founded by research students and academics in 1990 at the London School of Economics and Political Science. We seek to fulfil two broad objectives: to facilitate and maintain an interdisciplinary global network of researchers, academics and other scholars interested in ethnicity and nationalism, and to stimulate, produce and diffuse world-class research on ethnicity and nationalism. We do this through our global membership, our two leading journals, Nations and Nationalism and Studies in Ethnicity and Nationalism, our newsletter, The Ruritanian, which provides key updates on information in the field, and through our programme of events. Our YouTube channel features videos from our annual conferences, seminar series, lectures and debates. You can find us online at lse.ac.uk/ASEN, on Twitter at ASEN Events, or on Facebook at facebook.com/ASEN Events.